Namaste and greetings. Namaste and greetings. I, Riya Shah, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान, नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all for the IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today, we have gathered for a panel discussion on the topic, Institutional Support for Mental Health and Wellbeing. This deliberation is a part of the State of Gender Equality, #Gender Gaps, which is organized by the IMPRI Gender Impact Studies Center, GISC. As the chair for the session, today we have Professor Vibhuti Patel, visiting professor IMPRI, former professor, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. We welcome you, ma'am.
Namaste.
With the permission of the chair, I would like to introduce the gathering.
Yeah, please, Riya, go ahead and introduce the panelists.
Thank you, ma'am. We are elated to welcome the following panelists who have joined us today. Professor Anuradha Sovani, former professor and head, Department of Psychology, and former dean, Faculty of Humanities, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. Ma'am has also been a National Core Committee member and Ethics Committee Chairperson for the Association of Adolescent and Childcare India. Dr. Soumitra Pathare, Director, Center for Mental Health Law and Policy, Indian Law Society, Pune. Next, we have Dr. Swati Rane, Founder CEO, SevaShakti Healthcare Consultancy, Mumbai. Founder Vice President, Clinical Nursing Research Society, Rajasthan. Jasmine Kalha, Research Fellow and Program Manager, Center for Mental Health Law and Policy, Indian Law Society, Pune. Dr. Sadhana Natu, Associate Professor and Head, Department of Psychology, Modern College Ganesh Khind, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. We welcome you all. Now I invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to initiate the deliberation with her opening remarks and to proceed further with the discussion.
Yeah.
We look forward to learning from the esteemed gathering. Thank you.
Good evening, all. First of all, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar and IMPRI team for providing this important platform to have a panel discussion on institutional support for mental health and well-being. I greet the panelists, the esteemed panelists, Dr. Soumitra Pathare, Professor Anuradha Sovani, Dr. Sadhana Natu, Dr. Swati Rane, and Ms. Jasmine Kala. The idea of this panel discussion came as a result of the challenges faced by feminist movement during 80s and 90s to provide institutional support to women in distress. Impromptu consciousness-raising groups, self-help groups, drop-in centers were motivated by feminist praxis of personal is political. Its empowering outcome was experienced in terms of metamorphosis of women who were brutalized and robbed of their self-esteem and dignity due to multiple onslaughts of emotional, psychological, physical, sexual violence at their homes, at the workplaces, community, and once their hand-holding was done and the positive environment was provided, they emerged as powerful citizens due to timely support and hand-holding. The way these victims were supported by women's rights groups, and once they became survivors, they too continued chain of support to women and children who were facing mental health challenges. Not only this, so many creative expressions took shape as a result of collective efforts in terms of poems and songs and paintings and posters and quilts and street theater, plays, stories, novels, films, and discourses on relationship of intersectional vulnerabilities and unequal gender relations and mental health challenges. Over last 30 years, a lot of work has happened in this area, and gender mainstreaming in mental health intervention strategies has gained respectability in the mainstream psychiatry and psychology. Today, we have a panel of experts who are both erudite public intellectuals who have made important contribution at the level of policy and praxis, and they are also practitioners with the knowledge of ground reality. First of all, I would like to ask Dr. Soumitra Pathare that can you provide an overview of the state of art in support structures and systems for mental health and well-being? Can you reflect on the processes that went on policy formulation, Mental Health Policy 2014 and Mental Health Act 2017? And what would you suggest for changing the mindset of the state and non-state actors towards mental health challenges that citizens are facing, and currently even more so after the 2 years of very health emergency that our country, all over the world, that we all faced? Over to Dr. Soumitra Pathare.
Thank you to IMPRI for this invitation, and thank you, Vibhuti, for that asking me to speak on this issue. I was going to talk a little bit about the mental health policy, the law, and also some of the issues that have come up, particularly with respect to mental health during the pandemic. So let's take the mental health policy. It was adopted in 2014, so we are now 8 years away from the adoption of the mental health policy. Now, in most countries, usually a policy will get a review or they'll come up with a new policy at the end of 10 years. The policy cycle is anywhere between 10, 15 years. Most countries will not change their policy before that, knowing fully well that it takes time to do things. If you look at, so what have we done in the last 8 years? Have we, if you take the mental health policy and then compare it to what has actually changed in the last 8 years, I don't think anything has changed at all. And I don't think that any of that, anything that is written in that mental health policy has actually translated into services or has translated into any kind of change in the way we either perceive mental health problems or we deliver help for mental health problems. So, it's actually very disappointing, because you had a group of people, a large policy group, which included, for the first time, I suspect that policy in this country was being framed by people with lived experience. So it had a group of people. There were people with lived experience. There were also caregivers on that policy group. And it had a bunch of professionals from different fields, not just psychiatrists, but people from social science sector and from psychology and all in it. So considering that it had such a diverse representation, and it actually produced a more than reasonable policy statement, it's highly disappointing that that policy statement has, while the government has been quick to adopt it in 2014, it has not actually impacted any of our services. Normally, in most countries, what would happen is that once you have a policy which is adopted, then actions flow from the policy. So you would have a strategic actions list, and you would then governments would then start to follow those specific policy recommendations that are there, because it is a national mental health policy. It's not some policy group's recommendation. It was a country's mental health policy. But as with so many policies in our country, because policies are ultimately left to the whims of government, all kinds of governments, central government, state governments, that they either do something about it or don't do anything about it. We've also got a few states now which have got their own state mental health policies. Again, that has not necessarily spurred action on it. So, one of the biggest problems, two big problems with this entire space is, one is very often our policy is not evidence driven. But this time we actually had an evidence-driven policy. And the second is the disconnect between policy and services. The services should naturally flow from the policy, and that has just not happened. You can take the mental health policy and see which of those things that the mental health policy talks about has happened. Nothing has really happened. Turning to the Mental Health Care Act, that seems to have fared slightly better. I wouldn't say wonderfully better, but slightly better. And one of the reasons it has fared slightly better is, I think, because the Mental Health Care Act has been justiciable. The policy is not justiciable. Ultimately, if you go to courts will say, well, it's government's policy, they'll decide when they want to do it. Whereas the law is the law, and so it is justiciable. And what you find is that some things in the Mental Health Act have actually happened because of proactive action from government, from courts. If you and this is high courts across the country, as well as the Supreme Court. The high courts across the Karnataka High Court, for example, the Delhi High Court, the Bihar High Court, the Goa bench of the Mumbai High Court. So, these are high courts which have actually taken cognizance of the non-implementation and then pulled up state governments for it. And in the case of Karnataka, for example, the High Court is actually monitoring the implementation. It's not just saying do it and then left to them. So they've been actively monitoring the implementation. The Delhi High Court passed a wonderful judgment about the health insurance issue. According to the Mental Health Care Act, this exclusion of mental illness in health insurance should go, and the IRD have been dragging their feet and doing nothing. The Delhi High Court basically said, well, that's the law of the land, and so whether you write it in your contract or don't write it in your contract, people with mental illness are covered under the health policy. And so, made it a de facto thing, irrespective of what insurance companies might write in the contract. So the courts have actually been proactive. Some governments have been proactive, but a lot of what we are seeing happening today with the Mental Health Care Act is we are at the level where the institutional bodies and mechanisms are being put in place. Now, normally what would happen is all of this should have happened in the very first year after it was passed and before it got brought into force. That's what the 9 months were for, to do all of that. You still find state government saying, well, we can't do our SMHAs, state mental health authorities, because the rules have not been framed. 4 years, 5 years down the road, if state governments are going to claim that rules have not been framed, then it negatively impacts people's rights, as well as it also reflects extremely poorly on the state's willingness to do something about it. So the act has fared slightly better, but compared to the policy. And turning around to this COVID issue and how it has impacted really for mental health, I think one of the things that seems to have gone absolutely unnoticed in our country. There's so much hue and cry about the fact that how many people died because of COVID, and there's all these arguments about numbers. But here there is one set of numbers which is indisputable, which is that the National Crime Records Bureau published its suicide data. Now you have to remember that the NCRB suicide data is always an underestimate, anywhere between 30-40%. But NCRB says that in 2020, the first year of the pandemic, suicides in this country went up by 10%. Okay. Now, this is a huge increase, considering that suicide rates, while they've been increasing from 2014, have been increasing at a 1%, 1.5%, 2% kind of numbers. And then you get this big jump of a 10%. And don't forget that we've signed up to the SDG targets. And the SDG target is the suicide rate is an indicator, and the target is a 1/3 reduction in the suicide rate. On the other hand, what we've seen in 2020 is a 10% increase in the suicide rate. Now that has gone completely unnoticed. And paradox, the worst part of that suicide rate increase, if you see the NCRB data, is that suicides among young children under the age of 18 was up by about 19%. So twice the average rate is what the suicides under 18 have gone up by. Again, this has completely gone by unnoticed, and not something that any of our public health professionals or commentators have felt it important to commentate on. So, it worries me, because if something like suicide, where the rates have gone up so dramatically in 1 year, does not attract attention either of our policymakers, of our activists, of our academicians, then really it really does bode very ill for our society. I'll stop here, because I think I've said enough to begin with, and we can certainly discuss this further as we go along.
Please unmute.
You're muted, Vibhuti.
So, thank you, Dr. Soumitra, for connecting the micro, meso, macro, and also connecting them to SDG, and also a very alarming reality that our country is facing. And I think it's a very important signal that you have shown. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Anuradha Sovani, that as a teacher of psychology and also as a practicing counselor, what are your experiences, and can you share your thoughts and experiences about the public education that is required to popularize community-based support structures for mental health and well-being, such as drop-in centers, halfway homes, and consciousness raising? What role can they play?
Thank you so much, Professor Vibhuti, for having me, along with dear colleagues, talking to so many people out here, and a pleasure to work with you once more. And thank you, IMPRI, for making this possible. Like Soumitra raised so many important issues, and particularly the alarming issue of youth mental health. I would definitely like to share quickly in 10 minutes my thoughts. I think when I'm asked to speak about mental health and well-being, my mind immediately goes to the, like Vibhuti said, 30 plus years of community mental health work that I have been doing. So I've been very fortunate that I've been able to stride academic world as a university teacher, along with community mental health world as a trustee and consultant for Institute for Psychological Health. And my passion has always remained in that field, although I completely adore teaching, and I try to bring elements of my community experience to my teaching every day that I went to the classroom or interacted with MA or PhD students. So pro bono work has always continued parallelly to university over these 3 decades. And so I'd like to touch a little bit upon both these areas of my life, community mental health and institutions of the higher education area. We have wonderful panelists here with us who are both from health and education fields. So I think we'll all be able to dialogue very well on this later on. The core area of interest for me right from my PhD days, as a researcher, has always been chronic mental health conditions. Conditions such as schizophrenia, all other kinds of psychosis. And the emphasis is not merely on symptom reduction, but on mainly with a view to institute psychosocial rehabilitative interventions. So after the acute symptoms of the person suffering from the condition are handled using pharmacotherapy, I think it's more important that, like just now Dr. Vibhuti said, the community steps in, the family steps in, various organizations, government as well as non-government step in. And it is my belief that intervention begins only after medication has succeeded and the person has become accessible to us to work with as an individual, as part of a society, part of a family, part of a community. So I'll just go back a little bit to my memories from the mid-80s and 90s. I began to work with long-stay patients in long-stay institutions, which technically were called regional mental hospitals, always a highly stigmatized word. But these institutions were dedicated to the care of persons with chronic mental illness. I cannot deny that they at their own level were trying their best to extend whatever minimum care can be given to 1,800 odd patients that were housed in there. There was some institutional support, but it was bare minimum: food, clothing, shelter. And it kind of, whether it stretched to well-being was very hard to say. So since our theme is institutional support for mental health and well-being, I don't really see much of that happening then or now. However, what I want to highlight is that strangely, in spite of the overcrowding, in spite of the fairly outdated molecules of medication that were then available to them to treat all these thousands of patients, medication available cheap, in bulk, all the usual restrictions, and no planned rehabilitation activities in sight. In fact, my own PhD work was on a rehabilitation area. There were some good things happening in there in their own peculiar way. And today, when we look at the current circumstances in the 20s post-pandemic, I think these are going to be the forces that will again come back and start playing their role. I found that although women in these hospitals were always worse off symptom-wise. Why were they worse off symptom-wise? Because first, they were diagnosed very late. It is usually the males, the breadwinners, those who go out for work. They are the ones who are quickly brought in for psychiatric help. And these women would have been ignored, their symptoms ignored, labeled as all kinds of other issues. And then they were admitted only after their condition reached a very chronic stage and they could not be managed at home. And of course, we saw, so, the current thinking that we have in mental health, psychiatry, and psychology about early intervention, about addressing first episode psychosis, definitely did not apply back then, and to a large extent does not apply now So we have to work very hard. So that's my first tip to, you know, everybody who's an activist, who's busy in the field of mental health, to bring awareness about this, that the earlier we bring in people for help, the better. Usually we also saw with these women, as compared to men, that their families were very reluctant to accept them back. So although the men were welcomed back because there was so much stigma allowing them to stay in these institutions, the women continued to remain in these institutions, although they were quite well, their acute symptoms had receded. They were quite well functioning, but they would continue to be here, and all the ills and perils of institutionalization, which so many authors in the past and present have so well documented, were all happening for them. However, once they felt better, and again, I bring in, you know, I'm coming back to the people aspect of things. Once these women felt better, they would begin to volunteer for work, for cleaning work, for making rotis in the kitchen. Okay, because it was a natural thing that they did in their own house. There were humongously large number of rotis that needed to be made. I would actually take students to the kitchen of the regional mental hospital to make them realize what a task it is to actually physically look after 1800 patients. They would actually benefit in a strange way from this work, although in a way it was like labor which was extracted from them for no payment. But they got, you know, there were strict rules, like they were allowed to eat there instead of eating in the wards. They were allowed to chat with each other. They were allowed to contribute in, you know, planning kitchen activities. So in spite of all the rationing, etc., laid down by government rules, I actually saw this work as turning into its own perks and rewards, a kind of behavior therapy of sorts. And I think somewhere it was not intended, but I liked it that it was happening. Frankly, the scenario of long-stay institutions has not changed much. There is better pharmacological science. There are more efficacious molecules. We can control symptoms with a little more ease. But how much is happening in terms of institutional support for mental health and well-being? Very hard question to answer. That is where institutions which are self-driven, which are not governmental often, which are community-based, which are social enterprises step in. And we have had the Tridal project at IPH for over 2 decades. The idea of Tridal is that family, community, and the patients come together. We call them Shubharthis, or people on the path to wellness rather than patients. And the whole idea is to create a safe space and activity center where they can continue to improve their emotional cognitive functioning, be in that safe space so there's no threat, and still try and pick up better and better skills along the way. So currently, there is a partnership in place, again, a little ray of hope, although we are working very hard to sustain it, a partnership between Government of Maharashtra and Institute for Psychological Health, which has allowed us to use the space of the mental hospital for the Tridal Center. We are not banking on this, although we love having the space because we can always invite people from the mental hospital, the staff and the support staff and so on to attend our programs. But we also have another parallel plan of another space which we are creating called Mental Health Hangouts for a different profile of people with mental illness. So I'll talk about them later in our discussion. I won't dwell on that too much right now, but we clearly see, again, bringing in the point that Dr. Soumitra raised, that there's a kind of younger profile, a more educated profile, a second generation learner profile, a fairly tech savvy profile, who may not want to do the same rehab activities that we had been promoting at Tridal for several years. And people were very happy with those activities. We also have a small funded project with Paul Hamley Foundation, which has been supporting us in this. And I'd like to acknowledge their support for that. Now, in the little time I have remaining, about 2 minutes, let me quickly dwell on the other point of passion in my life, which is campus mental health. Many of the columns which I wrote were actually focused on youth and children mental health, parental handling of this, and also women. I remember writing a column for Maharashtra Times for about, I think, over 2 years, which was called Kumpna Bahir. And I'll dwell back on that concept of Kumpna Bahir a little later, because the idea is that we sort of limit ourselves inside our own fences.
English or Hindi translation?
Kumpna Bahir is beyond the fence. So Kumpan is fence. So Kumpla Bahir is this whole concept that even if the gates are open, like it happened in Nazi concentration camps, people won't leave because their mindset is that I'm not allowed to leave these gates, you know. So that column became quite a popular one, and a lot of women wrote in, you know, writing about how it's matching their experience. Coming to campus mental health, I luckily spent the same amount of time out in the community with IPH and with all these patients, and also in the university life as a faculty member of in a higher education institution, first University of Mumbai, then SNDT Women's University. I realized that emotional health is actually more important in the student life than the mere pursuit of academics. So in every department that I worked in, we set up a counseling center for the university. We tried our best to reach out to all the students who were willing to come in and talk. And we did realize, and we've got a paper on this, about how stigma does affect the degree to which they will come in and speak, even to a safe space like a counseling center in their own university with reassured confidentiality. I'll just end on the note that currently at IPH, we have a collaboration with MSFDA, Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy, where we are launching a 3-year project called Pradnya Parisar Prakalp. And I'll quickly translate Pradnya. So we talk about intellect very often in English as kind of focusing on academic excellence and, you know, good marks and good performance in exams. But if you think a little, there is various aspects to intelligence. There's this pure book intelligence that we want from our students. There is cleverness, okay, which is, we can call it hushari in Marathi or hoshiari in Hindi. And then there is wisdom, which in Sanskrit or in Marathi, we call it shahanpad. Okay, so it's like going beyond intelligence, going beyond cleverness and sharpness, the Akbar Birbal kind of cleverness, you know, which is street smart, which is snappy in its response. And wisdom is wanting social good, wanting to reach out to the maximum number of people and doing good for them. So I would really like to dwell on this Pradnya Parisar a little later, because we are looking at developing emotion-friendly campuses in 36 districts of Maharashtra through MSFDA. So I think institution support for mental health and well-being can come in many forms. It could be POSH committees. I think Dr. Vibhuti and I have served, many of the other panelists would have served on such. It could be rehabilitation efforts, as I've tried to describe in Tridal or mental health hangouts. Of course, the whole emerging field of positive youth development, PYD, or campus mental health is a huge area all of us need to tackle. But finally, to my mind, the key to sustainable solutions is handing over the ropes of mental health and well-being initiatives to stakeholders. And that's why what Dr. Soumitra said about lived experience and the voices of these people coming into policy is so important, not keep them in the hands of experts. And I think in every project we have driven, whether it's in the university or it is in IPH, we have found, like Tom DeMarco said, get the right people. Then no matter what else you might do wrong after that, the people will save you. So I think we are going to dwell upon how best to raise volunteerism, raise activism, get the right people in the right place to drive all these various efforts which we have underlined. I think I'll stop there and we'll discuss more through questions.
Yes, Professor Anuradha, Sovani, you have touched upon wide range of issues, right from community intervention, institution-based intervention, scenario in the mental health, mental hospital, and also the classroom teaching and student like mentoring of students and working on like the safe educational spaces and creation of safe spaces that we need to have. I think Dr. Sadhna Naptu has done similar work in Pune, and I think, as I know, she has been also, for a long time, she has been associated with the women's groups and women's movement, and she also is very active in her college with the students. So I would like to know from you that what kind of can you throw light on the institutional support for mental health and well-being in higher educational institutions with your specific experience in the college as well as in the women's groups, and how can we change the mindset of the larger systems which are and structures which are extremely biased against the minorities, against the marginal groups, and against women?
Yeah, so at the onset, I want to thank Dr. Arjun Kumar and the IMPRI team and Professor Vibhuti for inviting me as a panelist. I'll go quickly and flag off a few things which are there on my presentation, and then add slightly from a feminist perspective in mental health towards the end. And of course, we can continue further in the discussion and Q&A. So I'll share my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to flag off what is currently happening. And when I say currently, it has a history of at least 20-25 years. So higher education institutions and how have they been responding to mental health issues of youngsters. So you can see the figures, the All India Survey on Higher Education, the latest 2019-20, puts the figure at 38.5 million youngsters who till pre-COVID times were touted as the demographic dividend. But if we really take away from that gloss, Soumitra just shared some figures about suicide rates, and we've had that coming. So the 2015-16 National Mental Health Survey was already putting it at 15% of young adults, and we can suppose that 27.1 is our gross enrollment ratio. So we are talking about those in these higher education institutions. They are going through a number of mental health issues, including common mental disorders, severe mental disorders, and suicidal tendencies as well. And the COVID pandemic has blown this over and challenged us further. We have had to deal with the issue of stigma for a long time. So if you really see what is happening on the ground, and this applies to higher education institutions, we are still somewhere between awareness and stigma. So people are doing help seeking, but all those rules and conditions of mental illness and psychosocial distress being stigmatized still applies. And the recent UNICEF survey is telling us that just 21% of young adults in India are saying that we need to seek help, as compared to 83% from the developed countries who are showing more awareness vis-a-vis their own mental health concerns. Now, what has government or successive governments, what have they done? So the last many years, the University Grants Commission, New Delhi, has mandated several cells and bodies in higher education institutions to take care of different kinds of psychosocial problems, not just necessarily biomedical diagnosed categories of problems, but the entire range of psychosocial distress. We have to think about these youngsters who spend more than 6-8 hours on campus, and if they are hostelites, then obviously all their young life within these higher education institutions, and they're doing this physically, psychologically, and also aspirationally. So their aspirational health as a facet of emotional health also counts. So what are these mandated, cells and bodies? So they are a counseling cell, and 2012 UGC guidelines have firmed this up. So it has been something that has been regulated since 2000, but it has been definitely made, absolutely mandatory since 2012. So your counseling cell has to be functional. An anti-ragging cell also has to be functional. A grievances cell for some administrative and other issues with the staff, tertiary staff, whatever. The internal committee or the prevention of sexual harassment committee also has to be functional, and an equal opportunities cell for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other minorities have to be working and functioning. They have to be accessible. But cursory data and a few surveys that have been attempted, and there are some papers available, tell us that these are functioning in silos. So there is no coordination between them as they function within these institutions. And then what is lost? That there is an overlap in all these so-called issues, all of them leading to psychosocial distress. That is neither acknowledged nor, attended to. Also, government is not really taking, whether the UGC or the National Assessment and Accreditation Council called NAC, is not really taking any action on non-compliance. So these have just been mandated rules and regulations. Like Soumitra spoke some time ago that we have a wonderful policy, but what happens at the implementation level? So some of these guidelines simply look good on paper. Now, what is happening to their different psychosocial concerns? When we talk about students, often educators, administrators, and even people from the mental health and psychology community tend to homogenize this population, not understanding that from the 1990s, that is Mandal Ayog onwards, with different kinds of reservations coming into practice and opening the gates of higher education and knowledge to everybody and constitutional promises, you have large diversity. My own campus and several other universities are examples of this. And I've listed out these diversities. We do not name these diversities. We call them individuals. We call them students. So my narrative is going to be quite critical of homogenizing these youngsters. They come from completely different socioeconomic, caste, religious backgrounds. There are some similarities vis-a-vis age and some aspirations, but the rest of the differences are not recognized, and that becomes a major concern in addressing their mental health needs. So you have a perfect and challenging diversity, not just as educators, but even those who give mental health service. So it extends from urban and rural poor to international students. And we really cannot, address their issues in the same way, something that we have been doing for a long, long time. Now, what is the gap? So I'll quickly spell that out, that all impressionistic data is telling us that most of these cells exist on paper. They're not really functional in the sense that they should be. They're not empowered. They're not delivering on the ground. And something that my own experience in my institution tells me, that standalone counseling cells or any service delivery will never work because it continues to stigmatize those who seek help. But in most of the places, and we have put in a lot of efforts in trying to do training of trainers, inviting different higher education institutions to learn from our experience and share their own experience on the ground. But I don't see anything moving in the last so many years. Now, thanks to NAC, giving points, and after COVID, of course, mental health is now a buzzword. So you are actually getting points for showing that counseling cells exist. But who are our counselors? Skills, protocols, and training of mental health sciences, psychology, and psychiatric social work, etc., all our disciplines is one thing, but where is the perspective? The diversity perspective to address these young adults on campuses. They are not similar. They are equal, but they are not same. So I don't see that happening as outreach. And there are many, again, impressionistic data that has been shared. So I have done a couple of projects where I was assessing the efficacy, that are these counseling cells really delivering to young adults, and are they approaching them? So what kind of rapport are we talking about? Because that empathy has to again be, a diverse kind of a diversity-driven empathy, not an individualistic empathy. And my own reading is that our people are not mindful of this diversity when it comes to addressing mental health needs. Now, here's the elephant in the room, and I'm pointing that out. So the nub is, they're individuals, and we call them cases, like Rohit Vemula and Dr. Payal Tadvi, which are institutional lapses. So higher education institutional lapses. Several others working as interventionists, policy makers, and activists have called them institutional murders. But on my slide, I have resisted and I've used the word institutional lapses. So Vibhuti ji said initially that it is the vulnerable and those who need help most who often get excluded. And these include students from various marginalized communities, minorities, including religious minorities, sexual minorities, disabled students. And it's not just that these students are going through anxiety, depression, all the biomedical terms. They are actually facing day-to-day discrimination and exclusion in terms of what is practiced on the ground, which leads to their psychosocial distress and which often then translates into disorders. So there's a huge institutional ask in terms of building congenial and inclusive, truly inclusive ecosystems in higher education institutions for which create a level playing field in terms of physical, emotional, psychosocial and aspirational health of these youngsters. I'll just add, so these are two current very important references. One has already come out. It is a study conducted by these groups: Forum Against Oppression of Women, Forum for Medical Ethics Society, Medico Friends Circle, People's Union of Civil Liberties in Maharashtra after Payal Tadvi case, which are telling us that institutional casteism exists and it is definitely a mental health issue. It is not something that we can continue to, overlook. Something that is forthcoming is caste discrimination and exclusion in Indian universities, where N. Sukumar edited, where several narratives of marginalized students themselves, people like us who are working with these, excluded students, has been brought to the fore. Ethnographies where people are telling their lived experience of how this marginalization then creates psychosocial distress and mental health problems. So I think this is something we need to really take up. Now, specifically because Vibhuti ji spoke about my work, which is with grassroots organizations, which work with poor and lower middle class specifically, because when we talk about community mental health, we have to specify who are these communities. So I work with organizations that are rights-based and who are working with, really, really underprivileged people. And I've also been working on POSH committee, both of the university initially and then my own institution. So specifically identifying gender gaps in higher education institutions, there are certain mandated things like the Vidyarthini Manch or Women's Cell, which now I see some of us have been instrumental, as feminist activists who are also educators, in getting them started in early 90s. And I see them completely mainstream now. The agenda has been seriously hijacked, where they are now dealing with, martial arts and beauty parlors. And where is that transformative space that we were talking about, which is really essential for female students and staff? We all know that gender safety audits on campus are bypassed, where safety and security of not just girl students, but even queer students and several minorities, etc., is a big issue which ties up with mental health. And we cannot, keep these as different compartments. Now, these POSH committees are simply recommendatory and quasi-judicial. So they are supposed to have this onus of dealing with some justice and creating a safe space. The preventive element is often overlooked. So when we talk about gender and mental health in institutions or even otherwise, we will have to talk about all these intersections and not just, delimit ourselves to just certain groups who are already, privileged. And a quick point about my work, both on campus, my private practice, and with these community-based organizations as a feminist psychotherapist. Now, how is that different from a mainstream psychotherapist? I was also trained in the same way as a clinical psychologist who learned a number of therapies, and Vibhuti ji made some reference to the consciousness raising groups. So my own work in the women's movement And as a feminist activist, made me realize that I have to do a serious, rethink on how we need to engender our discipline of psychology, other mental health sciences also, both in our classrooms and the world as a classroom also, and as practitioners. So then last 20 years, my work has been now in therapy also as a feminist psychotherapist, where caste, class, gender, minorities, where one is caste sensitive, religion sensitive, queer sensitive, and you're not just dealing with individuals. I think I don't know if I've overshot my time, and are there solutions? And we can, of course, take this discussion forward. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sadhna Nathu, for bringing out a very important issue of diversity on campus and the kind of mental health challenges that the students and youth face. Also, the very detailed examination of intersectional marginalities and vulnerabilities that you described. And also, the most important, I think, is from mainstream psychology, how you have brought in the collective wisdom of the feminist psychotherapy. And I think I always say that economics and psychology, they are the hard nuts to crack. They are so full of misogyny. Still Freud raised them.
True.
So, and it's a very, very commendable work. And now I come to Jasmine Tala. Madam, you have worked in the area, you have been trained as a social worker, and your organization under the leadership of Dr. Pathare is also doing a commendable work or nationally known work, and the kind of successful examples that you have created. So in what way your center is providing support to individuals and community for mental health and well-being? And for the first time, like we know that the union budget has allocated 747 crores for mental health. That means there has been an official recognition of this important, challenging problem that we are facing in our country. So what way do you think, both at the level of macro level implications of your work in Pune and your day-to-day existential experience?
Thank you, Vibhuti, and thank you so much for the invite. I'm just going to begin by giving a trigger warning if any of the terminologies or the discussions have been discomforting for you. I'm just putting a helpline reference here. So I'll begin by just, I think the good thing after coming after a few speakers is I can just summarize and not really delve too deep. So how we've been conceptualizing the notion of mental health is that it is socially determined. And by that, we mean that our social positions in the society are affecting us both positively and negatively. And these social positions are, I think it's been explained in the previous speaker's discussion about whether it's your gender, caste, religion, your disability, or your age. All of these things place us in differential positions of power. So at different points in time, we will have more access to certain resources or more access to power, and in some cases you won't. So in that case, if we look at it as a socially determined issue, then we do feel that it's not just the responsibility of the mental health sector to talk about mental health. It is something that does require an intersectoral approach. Mental health is being impacted by everything that's happening around us. So we do have to make interventions in the outside sector as well. So whether it's your issues of poverty, unemployment, social welfare, other development indicators are equally important to look at. And in addition to, I think what has already been discussed is the interdisciplinary nature that we do need to bring in, which I think some people have highlighted about this deprofessionalization of mental health, and not just looking at mental health from a medical lens, but actually foregrounding the experience of lived experience, or bringing in certain other sciences which are also equally relevant when one looks at mental health and recovery and other concepts. So I'm going to add on to some of the things that Soumitra had mentioned about, while we do have this Mental Health Care Act and the policy, at the center, we've been trying to do various level things of trying to advance the mental health agenda. The first bucket, in a sense, is looking at law and policy, where we've recognized that laws and policies might be, paper documents, might exist in a legal sense, but actually there's a lot of gap that I think has already been highlighted about its implementation. So our approach has always been that we want to be collaborative. We want to work with different partners, whether it's your government partners or people with lived experience or other community-based organizations, to really advance how do we implement some things that are already there. So whether it is implementing a rights-based framework through a legal and a policy level. So we'd have some MOUs with state governments where we're trying to do some capacity building on how do we make this a reality. We've also been working around creating a repository of information, which is the India Mental Health Observatory, which is making sense of large data sets and evidence-informed policy decisions that could hopefully change how we do mental health in the future. Our second bucket is implementation research, where we believe that where we are interested in applying evidence-based interventions in real life settings and see how that works, and to create scalable models for that as well. So, for example, our work on Atmiyata, which is a rural community mental health intervention, where we're trying to enable rural community members to address their own mental health and social care needs by training community volunteers who are continuing to provide evidence-based support. The other example of us working in a different sector is health systems reform, where we tried to implement a rights-based perspective towards mental health care and treatment, where we worked with different healthcare systems. We did show an improvement in attitudes and behaviors. There were some policy shifts that also happened. One of the unique policy shifts was inclusion of people with lived experience as peer support volunteers in a healthcare system, which means that people with lived experience for the first time had a legitimate space within healthcare systems to foreground their experiences of recovery. Of course, there have been challenges of implementation, challenges of scaling up these interventions, which have proven to work. The other bucket of our work has also been focusing on suicide prevention, where we're looking at these different locations, whether it's your colleges or schools or health systems, where we could try and reduce this mental health care gap that everyone's sort of referring to, is especially for our younger population. How do we create solutions that are acceptable to the community, they're feasible, and they are scalable? So that's been some of our initiatives. We have some other work that's ongoing on peer support. We have some work on youth mental health, where we're looking at different ways in which we could co-design interventions, which means that we as researchers don't just come in and provide a solution to what things should be like and what things should look like, but really look at the community that we're working with, try and have a conversation to address some of the solutions that people need, that our communities need, and not use a very top-down approach. So that's sort of a common theme that we see across all of our interventions. We also have some capacity building interventions because we do believe that we need to change the discourse on mental health, which currently is a very biomedical, a very, in a sense, a slightly more curative approach. And we do want to bring in more conversations around what to do to prevent and promote mental health, and not just, deal with once mental health challenges have happened. So we have converted some of our evidence-based interventions to courses that people could do. One of them being the Atmiyata course. The other one is designed specifically for our media, where we have looked at what should the media be doing to report about suicide and suicide prevention, because there's a strong linkage there as well. That ineffective or non-evidence-based reporting of suicide can lead to increase in deaths by suicide. So that's another group that we would like to engage with and have been doing some work on the same. We also have been running an international diploma on mental health, human rights, and law. I think it's in its 13th year now, where we've been trying to equip people to have the language of the CRPD, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to look at how to analyze your laws and policies, but also critically look at your interventions and check for references of, what does a rights-based framework really mean in whichever context they might be coming from. Hopefully soon we'll also be looking at the Mental Health Care Act, so make it more accessible to people. And just, I suppose the approach has always been, how do we try out innovative interventions, but not purely for just gathering data or finding the evidence, but it is to bring in solutions that work for the communities that we work with, and try and find a way to scale this up, because often what we found is what works in a smaller context is never then taken forward and then is not taken at scale to benefit a larger group of population. So those are some of the things that the center has been doing. And as a social worker, I wish I'd known that there was this range of things that you could do to engage in the mental health sector. A few years back, it was a very different conversation around mental health. So it's nice to see that there are conversations around linkages of mental health rights, law and policy and research, having a conversation with each other. At the same time, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And clearly, while you see funding increasing for one type of work, there is a lot that can be done at a preventive, promotive level, which is completely getting missed out. But I suppose we'll take that up for our discussion. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine, for bringing out a very, very important dimension in a context of commercialization of mental health services. I think your center's work becomes extremely important, that you are not only like institution building, but you are also mentoring others so that they can also be in the field. Currently, like in Bombay, even when you pay 1,200 rupees an hour, you don't get a counseling facility. So there is a tremendous shortage and dearth of counselors with very empathy as well as the scientific way of dealing with the issue. So I think in that context, your center's work becomes extremely important, and you have also created training modules and courses. I think that's a very, very praiseworthy effort. Now I would like to ask Dr. Swati Rane that please enlighten us about the work that the Nurses Association has been doing, and even during the pandemic. I think a lot of mental health intervention, as well as the challenges that the nurses organization has faced, and your organization is also involved in training and capacity building. So please enlighten us about that. Yeah. Please unmute yourself.
Good evening to all. I thank IMPRI and Vibhuti Patel Madam for giving me this opportunity. And I thank all the dignitaries here for bringing their own perspective and putting more light on the mental health aspects, because as a nurse and as a healthcare professional, we see only patients from the hospitals and OPDs. And what I'm seeing here is that there is way more we can do, from the preventive aspects to the curative aspects to the rehabilitative aspects, and we as a team can do a lot of things together. And that is what is needed, looking at the overall scenario of number of patients increasing. And I think now mental health issues and mental health approach, the lens which we are using, a biomedical lens, should completely change, and we have to bring in more of biopsychosocial and spiritual aspect to the whole mental health thing. And on that basis, I have tried to make my presentation. I would like to share my slides. I also work with Jan Swasthya Abhiyan as a co-team member. And during COVID, we as a network of organizations came forward to help the COVID patients and also the healthcare workers, because we knew how the situation was. So we had developed a psychosocial telesupportive services, where we had trainers who had trained the trainers who were already the trainers, and we had some 47 trainers to whom we had trained in this, and 3 trainers were training all of them, and we got almost some 31 calls. And what we understood is that somewhere, the whole aspect of psychosocial support, as rightly madam said, that we don't have a psychologist or a counselor today, and that was missing also during COVID times. And most of the people who were staying back home were from all the age groups, and every age group had various issues, but there was no awareness that they needed counseling. So this group helped a lot, and we also joined with our party as Jan Swasthya Abhiyan Maharashtra, and we brought in doctors and nurses together for counseling, and there also we got quite a good support. But the only thing is that people are not still aware of such supports. Now, what we are going forward is that we are joining with many other NGOs who are working on mental health issues like Mumbai First, and we are trying to develop directory of mental health organizations and support services and the facilities, because today the doctor says that we get the patients, but we don't know where to send them after the treatment or during the treatment phase for rehabilitation or for care, because most of the patients, if they're coming from the background where they cannot be taken care of at home, then where do we put them? So we are trying to collate with the medical professionals, with the social workers, and also the civil societies. We are coming together and trying to form this directory. We are also trying to set up a roundtable for mental health of Mumbai and look with a different lens how to bring mental health at the priority level, because after discussing with the administrators, what they say is that mental health comes very, very, what do you say, it is not a priority right now. It comes very late in our aspect because we already have to deal with so many critical care cases, and also the NCDs, which again they are short of budget. So they said that from where do we put the budget? And we already know the way the current facilities, the mental health hospitals are. So all these things require a lot of political pressure, and also the demand should be from the citizens and also the civil societies, and only then mental health will be a priority for the administrators. This is what Jan Swasthya Abhiyan had done. We also had written to the government, Maharashtra government, for taking care of human rights of the public, because there was a lot of stigma going on for the nurses, doctors. They were not allowed to stay. Many of the nurses and doctors had a lot of pressure because of work, and because of stress, they had a lot of mental issues, but there were no counseling for them. They had to just keep on working, and many of them had a lot of issues of suicide. They wanted to do suicide, and we had done a study also with my organization in Sati, and so these things we did come across as Jan Swasthya Abhiyan, and we tried to bring it in media, and we did a lot of advocacy work by doing a lot of social media campaigning for developing a grievance redressal mechanism or non-discrimination or homeless persons, how for them, what type of facilities can be brought in during COVID. So SevaShakti is a healthcare consultancy which was doing completely pro bono work during the COVID time, that is almost for 3 years, for all the healthcare workers and nurses especially. And we did a few studies during the COVID times with Sati, and we found that the nurses were having a lot of mental health issues because of extra duties, because they were not getting safety gears for taking care of the patients. Most of the nurses were stigmatized, and they were beaten up in places where they were staying, and they were thrown out from their buildings. So all these things were having a toll on their mental health, but they were not being counseled, or they were not being taken care. They were not given leaves. So all these things were creating a lot of pressure on them. And if a health worker is under pressure, how do we see that they are going to take care of the patients? We recently completed a study with the lived experiences with lot of senior most hospital administrators, doctors, and nurses, and they shared their lived experiences during COVID. And what we understood is that somewhere there is a big gap between access of mental health facilities for the healthcare workers, because when hospitals opened up mental health services for their staffs were not ready to go because of the stigma. So again, a lot of awareness has to be created. And what we have during the process of this study, what I've understood is that there are hardly any researches or studies available on the lived experiences of the staff of the healthcare. And there are hardly any studies also which are on the nurses. Unfortunately, the nurses are not involved in the policy level decisions, and nursing has a psychiatric nursing MSc level course where the nurse is capable of taking care of the psychiatric patients and also work in the mental health issues in the public health, but they are not at all being considered for this work, and we are losing a lot on this bunch of nurses, which can be a good capacity building for us. Mental health issues were we had seen lots of during the COVID times. We have seen how the doctors and nurses were literally going through a lot of issues, and there was no security for them, the physical safety of the doctors. Even today, the doctors are beaten up if the patient dies. So all these things are creating phobia for the doctors, and the whole healthcare professionals are somewhere, facing depression, and they are not able to get treatment for that. Shortage, we know that in India, there is 0.8 nurse per 10,000 population. Psychiatrist is just not even one per 1 lakh population, and psychologist we don't have. Looking at the overall scenario, we can see that there is dearth of these healthcare professionals, and somewhere we have to start developing this part also. Without the proper infrastructure, without the proper manpower, we cannot take care of the growing, and it is like, it is the magnitude is increasing of mental health issues from all the age levels after COVID. And because of that, we are seeing exploitation of the ashas, and ashas are being, used as Jite kami tite ami, that is what we call in Marathi. So usually wherever there is some shortage, Asha is put. Asha is just 10th pass or 12th pass. How much load can she take? That we have to understand. And because of that, Ashas are suffering from mental health issues. I just took some quotes from few of the hospital administrators, and what they had told is the same thing, that the patients are not ready to visit a psychiatrist or visit the mental health facilities. One of the retired ophthalmologists, she said that now she has done a cognitive behavioral therapy because her ophthal patients are not coming for ophthal issues to her, but they are coming for the issues related to psychiatry or mental health, and she is now counseling them. So this is the level where, patients are still having that stigma. Then there was a medical administrator from public health. Again, they said that they have asked for mental health apps or some ways where the lifestyle changes can help the patients to come out of the mental health issues what they are going through. There are some I'm sorry about this. The psychiatrists who are there already in the public health domain, they themselves are saying that they themselves need some type of help from for their own issues, but they are not able to give time for that. So somewhere we have to understand that the healthcare givers who are taking care directly, especially the psychiatrist or the psychologist or the mental health nurses, we have to take care of their mental health also, and that is going to help them to give better care. So these insights will help us to develop some more research studies. Also, decriminalization of suicide is very much important, as said by one of the psychiatrists from the public health hospitals. So these are the things what I understood from them. And the recommendations part, if you really see, so today the whole narrative of recommendations has changed, because we need mental health facilities and mental health healthcare providers from various levels, that is from the school to the prenatal mom to the postnatal mom, from that background to the various age groups of adolescents to senior citizens to even healthcare professionals. So I feel that we have to develop this whole thing into different levels, that is at an individual level, at a family level, and at a community level. With that, again, we have to understand that just psychiatrists or psychologists, if they work in their own spaces, it is not going to help. They have to come together and work as a team, and we need more of such facilities at the public health levels, because mostly in rural areas, we know that mental health issues are still stigmatized and patients suffer a lot. We also need some different type of models, like Tarasha is a field action project by Tata Institute of Social Sciences, where they have conceptualized a community-based recovery model for women recovering from mental health disorders. So at the core, the project addresses the issues of shelter and livelihoods. So these type of new models are going to help us to the current problems today. And with that, I thank you all for listening this.
Of healthcare providers, especially the nurses, and the patriarchal model of healthcare system, which treats doctor as a father figure, nurse as a mother figure, and patients are totally infantilized. So I think we need to break this hierarchy. And I think we had an excellent 6 very powerful, well-documented, mind-blowing and erudite presentations. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So I think you all have second round, and you can focus on way forward, what we can do, both state and non-state actors, what can we do. So we'll start with Dr. Pathare. Yeah.
Thanks. I don't know how much time we have, so I'll try.
Now you have 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll keep my comments brief. I wanted to focus on two different parts of the mental health ecosystem. We like to blame policymakers. We like to say policymakers don't do anything, governments are not willing to do anything. I'm just going to step back from that and ask ourselves that can we really blame policymakers? The mental health system, this provision of mental health services, mental health academia, mental health professionals, and mental health advocates very often are stuck in a time warp of the 1960s, okay? Unfortunately, while the world has moved on and conceptualization of mental health has moved on to a very different way of understanding what causes mental health problems, what are the potential solutions for it, we are still stuck in this extremely two things that I would say is an extremely medicalized perspective on mental health, so that we see health as the only way to address it. And the second is a non-rights-based way of understanding it. So we don't really take a rights perspective on people's mental health problems. And finally, this has been touched upon by other people also, that an utter lack of understanding of how structural factors impact people's mental health and what needs to be done about those structural factors. And the standard answer to kind of parody it, and I know you'll be critical of this because I'm parodying it, but the standard answer to parody it, hum doctor hai, hum kya kar sakte hai, paisa nahi hai to. I mean, that's the kind of ridiculous level of mental health discourse that goes on among what passes for mental health academia in this country, So, I mean, before we blame policymakers, let's also try and actually look within ourselves, because who gives policymakers inputs? We give policymakers the inputs. How do you blame them? I mean, if this is the input they're getting, what do you expect them to do? They're not going to do anything better. So that's one aspect of it. And in many other countries, for example, a lot of the mental health changes in the movement has actually been led by people with lived experience. Then there's a vibrant mental health lived experience movement. Unfortunately, the mental health lived experience movement in India is typically representative of what happens in mental health academia also. It is urban, it is English speaking, it is the privileged classes, and there is zero representation of the people who are actually who suffer the major brunt of mental illness and poverty. I mean, that there's no dialogue or discourse which brings that in. It's a very middle class privileged discourse that even the mental health lived experience movement brings into India. I'm sorry to sound extremely critical, but that is the reality of it. So, if we want to try and build, if you wanted to reimagine what a mental health space in India would be like, then I think these are the issues that need to be tackled. I mean, there are very few organizations which actually work with marginalized communities and their mental health concerns. There is Hasiradullah in Bangalore, which is trying to work with the issues of mental health of rack pickers and working with the rack picker community. Or there is Anubhuti Trust in Mumbai, which where Deepa works with the NT-DNT communities. Now they don't come into the mainstream mental health discourse. Their concerns are not brought into the mainstream mental health discourse. Academia ignores them. So, we have a very, it's the vast majority of people with mental health problems in this country have very little link either with the theory or the practice of mental health. And if we want to really do something about it, then I think that's where we should be putting in our efforts, Thanks. I'll stop here. There's not much time anyway.
Vibhuti, unmute. You need to unmute.
And the way we had robust women's movement and the social movements of 80s and 90s, where so many important and positive outcomes were there, I think we need to bring those days again. Now, Dr. Anuradha Sovani.
Yeah, thanks, Vibhuti. I think I'll pick up from where Soumitra left off. And he talked about, why the conversation has not yet spread to the common man and to the community. And being an inveterate optimist, I feel that is what we are supposed to do. So I think academicians need to come out of academia and start writing for, unfortunately, I'm being critical of HEI and NAC over here, but everybody is so focused on publications which are API recognized that nobody really talks about addressing the common reader, addressing them in mother tongue, addressing them in simple language, which will reach every home. So Dr. Sadhana has put up her book. I think all these are books which not only the academic community, I'm sure she did not mean it only for students, she meant it for the community at large. I have also shared a chapter. I remember doing this project with Michelle Stack at British Columbia, where I love that topic, that point which Swati brought up, that we need to get media to start realizing that they have to respond and report very responsibly about what is happening out there in the community. And so this whole chapter, which I have put into this book, I put it in the chat for everyone. It was called Triggering Conversations on Mental Health, and it had a lot of roundtables with journalists, with psychology students, with nursing students, with education students, and finally even with my support group at IPH, which was people recovering from chronic mental illness. And they had such good insights to give in terms of how journalism can take a very educated stand about how to report. I think the other thing, and I really want to stress this, Vibhuti, because I think one has to keep, I feel that just as water on a stone will one day, bore down holes into that stone, somewhere it will break that stone. One has to keep dripping points onto the society. You cannot write something very erudite once a year and then keep quiet. You have to keep doing it, and then one day some arrow will hit somewhere, So I think, for example, today in Maharashtra Times, I have an article on, because it is International Communications Day, 17th May. So, Samparka julto ahe ki tutto ahe? Is our communication getting better or are we breaking down? Okay, now it's not related directly to mental health, but I get an opportunity to write about how we are getting so caught up in our social media spaces and losing out on face-to-face connections. Another experiment which I just like to mention here, since we are talking about media and use of publications, I have started, since Vibhuti and I have worked together at the university, she'll be interested to know that after I retired, I started this whole series which I've put on Kindle on children's books. So the stories are called Vic stories. So my hero is Vic, who's a little boy between 5 and 10 years of age. My audience is little children who are 5 to 10 years of age. The stories are piloted on children who are between 5 and 10 years of age. Currently they are English, but of course, since I write so much in Marathi, so I've put that link up also on the, so it's freely available to everybody on Kindle. And what I've tried to do in that now, my current series 2, which I've put up, is on inclusion. So I believe, and I completely agree with what everybody before me, who spoke already said, that you have to bring concepts of inclusion early into children's minds. You can't suddenly teach them, when they are 30 years old or 40 years old. So my stories are small stories, 800 to 1,000 words. And in each of these stories, there is some aspect of including some child who is special. It could be a sensory handicap, it could be some hearing deficit, it could be a physical disability. There is one story about a child who is extremely intelligent, who is gifted, and that itself kind of marginalizes them because nobody understands them. So that, I think that is what parents need to start reading to their children, discussing with their children. So that's why
that's one good thing even in the national education policy, because they say that we have to start this sensitization at the age of 3. Early childhood education.
Exactly. So that's the point I wanted to make, that even on IPN, on Indian Psychological Network, that forum also, we have started a discussion on these big stories. So I find it fascinating to write, because I think it's so, it's a learning experience to get into the child's mindset and look at the world, because frankly, they don't have stigma. They don't have all these blocks that all of us have developed. So another last thing I'll mention is this chapter. I'll put it up in chat for everyone. Mental health management in low resource settings. I think we need to stop breaking our hearts over how there's no money and how nobody is giving us any help, because as you have correctly highlighted, there's plenty of money. There's more than enough funding set aside, center and state. But where is it getting used? So that chapter came in this nice, interesting book which came out in 19 called Miss How and Me. And it's a collection of short stories on inclusion. So I'll put that reference up also. So my point which I want to make, and I'll stop here, is that it is not enough to write in erudite journals and write textbooks. One needs to write in the lay press, write online, write in blogs, write wherever people are willing to read, in whichever language they are willing to read, and try and address them as early as possible.
For past 6 years, I have been writing in Gujarati Kal Nirnay. And last year's Kal Nirnay, I wrote on mental health.
Correct. And it's amazing. I'll share this experience.
The housewives. And
yeah, I was asked to write Chalishin Antar's 3 months. Okay, my woman's mind after 40. And it was for Kal Nirnay, and I was like, oh, should I agree with you. I should I write for Kal Nirnay, because it's on the back page. And my mother said, don't be silly, everyone
all
reads
housewives read. All housewives read. It
is
right there in the kitchen. And this even, it's every time
we have to take these blocks out of our mind, that who do we write for? We have to write from academia to the layman.
Correct. Thank you very much. Extremely enlightening. And now, Dr. Sadhana Nathu, please.
Okay, so I'll just share our institutional model first, something that we have tried, and then thoughts on a number of things, that others have also shared. So this is something that we have tried institutionally, and we have built this enabling mental health ecosystem on our campuses. So our institution, the management, runs different kinds of colleges, and within the same area we have about 4 or 5 different campuses. So we are talking about campus community mental health in the real sense. So one thing that we have been doing, I think speakers before me also spoke about how we often neglect the preventive and promotional aspect of mental health and address the curative and treatment aspect. So realizing that early on from my work in the women's movement as a youngster, for the last 30 years, we have been running Disha Speak Out and Peer Support Group, where the students are peer leaders and they help in validating a number of experiences, lived experiences. So you can call that mental health first aid. And they've been doing a great job. And I have a number of papers. You all can look them up on Google Scholar. But interestingly, so do my students. A number of my undergraduate, postgraduate students, PhD students, not surprising, but a lot of my undergraduate students have written both in Marathi and English, and you can find that on Google Scholar as well. We've put in a lot of efforts in writing out about mental health, from stereotypes to young adults, diverse young adults' concerns. And Kaleidoscope is a thematic compilation coming out for the last 20 years. It is trilingual. So students write in the different languages that they are comfortable with, and they bring in the science as well as their own lived experience. It has gone to various places, not just in India, but the rest of the world where my students have gone. On campus, we have skill workshops, which are called for by our faculty, because we are a multi-faculty college with a lot of postgraduate courses where students from other states and other countries are coming in. So we run a range of skill workshops for both students and faculty. And we do a lot of TOT across Pune University. And we've been doing this for a long, long time, 30 years. We've been running a suicide prevention campaign on all our campuses, where students are running this campaign. And it is very, very, something as serious and deep as suicide. Students come out with creative stuff. So street plays, songs, posters, e-posters, and they also come out with a language that speaks to each other. So again, this is done trilingually, and all of this has been documented so that evidence base has been created. Students have presented in conferences, written widely in various languages, and done dissemination. Realizing that our tertiary staff also needs self-care. Swati Rane was talking about self-care for a range of carers. So we run this with our students who are trained to take groups, so do group therapy with tertiary staff in Hindi and Marathi. Something I realized very early, that we neglect our campus community, which is also, a microcosm of the macrocosm outside. And we have huge campus communities. So some of our work is with community-based organizations where students, undergraduate students, do a structured internship program where they get the plethora of mental health work, which ranges from non-formal education to rights-based work. So it's not a kind of clinical work. So a number of organizations, Mahila Sarvangin Utkarsh Mandal, which works on gender and health, gender and mental health, several organizations that work on gender and mental health, those that work in non-formal education and emotional health of children with, school dropouts and the rest. So we have, again, a number of agencies that we have tied up with. So both on campus and off campus, there is an idea for future psychologists about how varied the picture is, from poverty to malnutrition to several other concerns which tie up with mental health. So this is an attempt to offer them. And I see social work students going there, but rarely do our clinical psychology students, they only aspire for individualistic psychotherapy, which doesn't work. We also ran a course for 5 years with Bapu Trust, which is psychosocial skills and counseling for community work. And we had people from NGO sector, students and housewives, and several people signing up. But because we do a lot of work, we ourselves are at a risk of burnout, and we have to discontinue that course, but I'm sure we'll bring it up again. And the counseling cell is not at the apex. The counseling cell is for self-referral, and referral by faculty members, because our primary mental health is taken care of by Disha, which has solid on the ground presence. It is totally word of mouth. We had to go online in the last 2 years, but the way in which our student peer leaders have turned out, and they go back to their own communities with this and various organizations and workplaces. So I think we need to build an ecosystem and not do absolutely cherry picking. That is something we have tried. Now to also talk about dissemination and what can be done. So yes, just like Anuradha ji mentioned, I have written extensively for newspapers, and she was talking about Kal Nirnay. So for about 4 or 5 years, I wrote for Lok Vigyan Sangatna, which brings out science and people's science movement, annual calendar. So I wrote easy to understand Marathi mental health for about good 5-10 years. I've done lots of writing for several community-based organizations. A lot of it is in Marathi. And, yeah, somebody has written about my student, Nandini, I think. Yeah, Swati just wrote. Anyway, so yeah, we'll. All right. So just to end with, this writing thing. So it's very important that we access different kinds of readers and, disseminate in the right way. Now, I really liked what Soumitra said. So what is the, and of course, there are international publications. If you want to access what I have written, you'll find all of it on Google Scholar and you can use it accordingly. We are at a very important juncture, thanks to COVID-19, where even globally, what is the discourse like? In all mental health sciences, there is a growing recognition of decolonization of psychology, of psychiatry, and other mental health sciences. And all of us and stakeholders need to connect with it.
Correct.
The second thing where I agree with Soumitra, for a long time, who has represented whom, whether in academia or as practitioners? Privileged people. And we need to make way for those who really need to speak. And when he spoke about the user movement, ouch. But yes, once again, who represents whom? So he listed out Deepa Pawar's Anubhuti, and I've been in touch. She also works with our students, and our students are interning with her, and they're learning about what is happening at grassroots level. I'll mention 2 more entities and organizations. One is Divya Kundakari, who has set up a platform called Blue Dawn, which is for Bahujan mental health. Okay, of course, it welcomes everybody, but it pitches at these excluded people and communities. And a third effort, which again I have been connected with, I'm connected to these 2 as well, Deepa and Divya, because as a feminist psychotherapist, researcher, and a community person, one has to learn from them and connect them with future psychologists, that is students also. The third effort is by Hasina Khan of Bebak Collective, and I have been a part of the several talks that she arranged. One was about Islamophobia, not just in the minds of common persons, but people within, the discipline and practitioners, both academia and practitioners as well. So we really need to be reflective. One is talking about policy and policy makers, and yes, we need to, question them, critique all of that, ask the right tough questions. But we also need to set our house in order, both as academicians.
That even Dr. Soumitra said that we have to set
and I completely agree with it. And I have been really, really troubled in the last 2 years because those cracks are exposed. And if anybody wants to hear from me in this vein, you can again check out on YouTube the talk that I gave for Sama in Delhi, where I was completely critical. At the same time, I was self-critical because I'm also a member of both these groups, educators as well as practitioners, both on and off campus. So I think we really need to find our own connection and we need to get it right. I mean, it's high time.
Very, very.
Yeah, I think I'll end here.
Yeah, there's that level of humility we have to. Yes. Now, Dr. Jasmine. Hi, Jasmine. Yeah.
Right. A lot has already been said, so I'll keep my point really short. I think everyone's highlighting the fractures within the mental health sector. There are lots of narratives, and there is a constant question about who represents whom, whose voice is authentic or not. And I think that needs a lot more exploration, because none of these categories are homogeneous. Like we've been saying, it's intersectional, it's intersectoral, it requires a lot more exploration into what social sciences would call an epistemic privilege. So I think that that's something that perhaps one needs to look at, and therefore then perhaps things would change. How we talk about mental health and how we do mental health might change. Again, I think mental health is not homogeneous. It's different for different communities, and we have to go to communities and check with them what do they need, how should we respond to those needs, and curate responses that work for that particular community. And having said that, I think there are lots of interventions that are already doing that. There are positive examples of people looking at rights-based intervention, who have co-designed interventions with their communities. So if we really want to bring an alternative voice to this medical voice of mental health, then we have to look at scaling interventions, which is expanding the scope of these interventions to reach more and more people, to question the narrative that already exists, will require us to do things differently, fund things differently, change our lens, the way we look at just what mental health should look like. It has become the buzzword, but it really lacks a lot of substance with it. Everyone's a mental health advocate, but I think there is a certain amount of criticality that the sector also needs to bring in, which I think has already been highlighted. So I'm just gonna pause there and keep it short.
Thank you, Jasmine. I think now Dr. Rane. You also give the suggestion for both the JSA as well as the Nurses Association.
So I will go through the act, what I feel from the act when I'm not a mental health person, okay? I was brought into mental health because of COVID and because of the healthcare workers facing so much of mental health issues. And that's for the past 3 years, I have been rigorously working in mental health space. So what I feel as with the lens of a hospital administrator and as a public health specialist, when I see this mental health act, what I feel is that they're talking about dignity, which is very much right-based. But how do you be accountable for the dignity? Like if you see the mental health hospitals, the patients, the women are not having proper clothes. They don't get sanitary napkins. They don't get their inner clothes. So how are you going to maintain that dignity of the patient? Okay, if you're not going to have any variables, what are the parameters for dignity of the patient, of the person who is suffering from mental health? So somewhere I think there is a lack of accountability, which I felt as a public health specialist, which is missing in this act. Also, recently we had a lot of issues on dowry and divorces happening because of that. So if you see the gender perspective of that, okay, most of the divorces are because they are calling their wives that she's mentally ill and they're trying to get the divorce. So where is that reflecting in the act? That is what I want to understand. So if you see critically with the current problems, I think this act is not yet, I can say, right, or it is still raw. And there are many things which I think it should go to the user end, and it should have more of consultations to bring in, because today the mental health issue starts at the prenatal mom's time, okay, before the child is in. And by the time that she is into the postnatal part, she is into postnatal depression. The child suffers, and because of that, the whole family suffers. So who's taking care of that family part of it? Okay, who's taking care of that mother? Who is taking care of the child who may have autism? Okay, and the family has not yet understood what is autism. Okay, so the whole genre has to be changed, or we have to have different narratives. Like if you see the Alzheimer's or dementias, what type of care, what type of analysis, what type of scope for diagnosis we have. So I think that this mental health space has become more diverse than the physical health. And unfortunately, because it is invisible, I think that somewhere it is under the carpet still. Okay, and I became a mental health patient during my COVID counseling and COVID work, because I was working like a mad person for 16, 17, 18 hours. I was not eating on time. I was just behind the patients, whether they are getting the oxygen, whether they're getting admitted, what is happening about their families, how they're managing the financial issues. So all these things, I think I drifted away from my space. And that was the time I bursted. And my court senior, Brynel, told me, you just stop, Swati, for a few days. So almost, I think I stopped work for more than 3 months. And I was fortunate enough that I have medicos who are my friends. And through their counseling, I came out of this depression. Okay. Otherwise, I was a depression patient for almost for 3 months. I was getting scared to get into lift. I was getting scared to talk to somebody outside who was a stranger. So when I faced that lived experiences, I felt that if a person like me can go through this, you can understand what the actual people who are battling to get 2 times meal, they must be suffering from. What type of agonies their children must be suffering from, because the children of my maids and all, they hardly had mobile phones to go to school or attend to the school. So understand that what psychology it is. And on the other hand, we had, because I was counseling both the ends. So at the lower end also, and at the higher end. At the higher end, the problem was that screening was so much increased that my friends' children were seeing phones. It's like, 4th standard, 5th standard children were seeing phones and talking about it. So that psychological issues social issues were very different than the other issues. So all these issues are issues, but then that is because of the social fabric was disturbed. So if the social fabric is disturbed, how are we as mental health professionals going to help the social fabric? So we need the social scientists. We need the common man who has to come to us and talk to me the way I'm talking to you all. And that is the time I think we have to, that is the time I think I was very happy with the Samskar Vargas which were going on, because at least there, the children were getting the right place. Okay. They were getting some right, how I would say is that right moral values, because the whole chain of moral values, the whole chain of joint families was broken during COVID, and the people were suffering because 2 parents were working continuously on laptops. Okay, children were at the screen or with the maid. So who was going to take care of? So how the mental health of a child will be if they hardly see their parents, though they are in the house. So what I feel is that, this part of community integrity should come in. Also, as a hospital planner, I feel that, mental health hospitals have to be changed. Okay. They cannot be the jails which were there during British ages. Okay. You see the mental health hospitals today. How are they? They were jails and they are just used like that. So we have to change that part. We have to bring in halfway homes. So we have to bring a lot of things into it. Suicide should be decriminalized, definitely, but it should be implemented. That thing should be implemented, and the whole biomedical part which we are taking, or the elite class of the academia. Okay, I think we should break those barriers and come to the ground and check the ground, that whether whatever I am teaching or whatever I'm writing, is it really helping the grounds? And that can happen only when we leave our chairs and go to the communities or make the groups with I try to make groups with the working women. I try to make groups of my maids, their family members. So I was into various social groups. That was the reason 24 hours was less for me, and I became a depressive patient because of that, because I was myself not trained for it. So all these things, I think we
need is a support structures, and the way the community support structures, whether you are trade union or self-help group or voluntary organization or community-based organization or professional body. I think everywhere we have to bring mental health issues center stage.
Because
we
don't
stigma,
have a
I think in all your this thing, the stigma has come as a very prominent issue, that the moment you say that you have mental health issues, immediately you get stigmatized, you face isolation. So I think that's a major challenge that we are facing. And there is a very good response that we have received from Ms. Nalini Tatte, who writes that the esteemed panelists have touched upon mental health support gaps, recommendations at the community, educational and patient care level. Although need for support for nurses and ASHA workers was touched upon, I can see the points regarding their accessible, diversity-driven, evolving target group and homogenizing them are very applicable in developing mental health support for medical doctors and other professionals, clinical or non-clinical. During my little work of 50-bedded center, and as I explored the mental health as a part of PhD project, I observed very strong resistance to participate in the discussion by doctors themselves. No, so I think we can see the kind of antipathy, not only empathy, but antipathy that you have on mental health issues. So I think, and she has also given some other comments. Would you like to speak, Ms. Nalini Tatte? You can unmute and speak. Would you like to speak? Because there are several other comments also you have given. Hello. Okay, I think she's not there. So I would like to.
I think she's unmuted.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
yes, ma'am. So just a small background of where I come from. I have formally trained as a clinical psychologist at MA level under Dr. Sovani, and then I went ahead to work in palliative care and did my PhD under Dr. Nathu. So this panel was a very nostalgic one for me. Coming back to the topic that we are discussing here, mental health of doctors is close to my heart because I watched my own team members go through things while I worked in end-of-life care. And although COVID has highlighted doctors and medical systems issues, mental health concerns right now, I believe it has been this concern has been around from the beginning. As we see doctors being affected, their line of treatment or their way of even talking to their patients and handling family members being affected by their own demons or anxieties. I mean, for example, for me, I have seen that in the doctors breaking news about cancer prognosis or diagnosis was
even
very
at the time of
different.
a disaster like Bombay, I have witnessed so many doctors having nervous breakdown after seeing piles of dead bodies, no, after the 92 riots, Bombay riots and all. And as a result of which, when they came together, they spoke to each other, Forum for Medical Ethics and the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics came into existence. So yeah, there is a crisis, challenge, and then you find the alternative, collective, and the collective wisdom works.
So I was telling Nandini, she should read up on the previous work done by Foundation for Research in Community Health and the work that Sehat has done with studying how doctors study, what gets left out. And there is
gender in medical education.
Outside academia, wonderful research organizations who've been committed to this. I work with and
medical humanities is a field that is so neglected in India. So I remember a panel with Sehat where we had discussed medical humanities, and I think it's important to bring that in. So I think the readers or the people in our audience in Facebook should also look at the chat box for all these resources which different people in the panel have
they should be shared, because there are in several social media platforms, not only Facebook, Spotify, then and also YouTube. There are 6 platforms currently who are watching our panel discussion. So I think now I would like to conclude. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Soumitra Pathare, Dr. Anuradha Sovani, Dr. Sadhana Nathu, Dr. Swati Rane, and Dr. Jasmine Kala for making this discussion extremely interesting, mind-blowing, and even amongst yourself also you responded to each other's presentation. That was really healthy. It was a true panel discussion. I would like to conclude with the statement that institutional support includes like sets of policies, practices, physical facilities, processes, which made available to the organization, to the community, and which results in a successful outcome. Having good mental health or being mentally healthy is more than just the absence of illness. Rather than it's a state of overall well-being. That's what the WHO tells us. The concept is influenced by culture, and I think all of you brought in that aspect that we are not going to ethic approach is limited, and what we need to have a culture-specific intervention. Knowing the community and stakeholders' interests are most important, and they are the ones they have to have their agency and decision-making power. And having the ability to cope with and bounce back from stress and sadness. I think the way Swati Rane gave her personal example, so that how she bounced back after the support she got from the colleagues in Jana Swasthya Abhiyan after she faced depression. Being in a good mental health state can keep you healthy and also help prevent serious health conditions. Several studies have revealed that positive psychological well-being can reduce risk of heart attacks and strokes. On the other hand, poor mental health can lead to poor physical health and harmful behavior. Lifestyle factors are extremely important. Swati also brought the aspect of spirituality and also the regular exercise, eating healthy diet, getting enough good quality sleep, managing your stress, limiting your use of any dependence on whether it's alcohol or drugs. I think they are very important to improve your physical, emotional, and mental health. By positively managing and supporting employees, the mental well-being, the employers can also ensure that staff performs to their potential. And I think Dr. Anuradha Sovani's experience of classroom teaching, as well as providing the support to the future psychologists, I think they both are equally important. So theory and praxis both are extremely important. So I think every sector of the economy and society, whether it's an industry or community or individuals, everyone has to be aware about the mental health challenges that we are facing, and we have to collectively strive. Both state and non-state actors have to come up. Now let us see, when 742 crores are allocated for the first time in the union budget, what has been the outcome at the end of the year. That's very important, whether it just goes down the drain or it is parked in the ministry and remains unutilized, because even to use money, you have to work hard, you have to send proposal and channelize the funds. So that's very, very, very important. So thank you very much, all the panelists and participants. Over to IMPRI team. Thank you.
And thank you, Vibhuti, for, as usual, summing this up so beautifully. It was a great panel to be part of.
So, Anshula, for a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. And as we come to the end of this extremely thought-provoking discussion on institutional support for mental health and well-being, I, Anshula Mehta, Senior Assistant Director at IMPRI, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks. I am grateful to our entire distinguished panel for taking out the time to be with us today. We are grateful to Professor Vibhuti Patel for taking out the time to chair this session and for really steering the discussion. Thank you, ma'am. We thank our panelists, Dr. Soumitra Pathare, Professor Anuradha Sovani, Ms. Jasmine Kalha, Dr. Sadhana Nathu, and Dr. Swati Rane for taking out the time to share their valuable insights and perspectives. We thank all of our attendees who joined us here on Zoom as well as on Facebook Live, or would be watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our podcast. Thank you again, and I hope that you continue to tune into future episodes of Gender Gaps, and I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.